Hola, Barcelona. Come by show. Okay, I know we are not in Barcelona, but being from Spain, I got a bit excited about this. And technically, we can say that we are in Barcelona. At least our hearts are there. Welcome to DrupalCon. My name is Alex Moreno, and I've been a Drupalista for many, many years. Yes, sure, probably not as many as the person that I am introducing, but you can imagine how excited I am to be here today to do this job. But first, please allow me to show you a couple of things. The first one is the Drupal shop. This is a project that we have created to raise funds for the Drupal Association in a time which is particularly difficult for everyone, and the Drupal Association is no exception to that. I would like to recognize the work from people like Will, Shurabi, Ruth from Mautic, or Daniel and Rachel from the Drupal Association. Thanks a lot for your help and for making this possible. And if you want to help, these are the ways in which you can do it. The most obvious, do some shopping. We can, you can also do something like joining the working group, give us your feedback, or even promote your own events like NetCamp, Talking Drupal Podcast, or like the Drupal England and Wales Association are starting to do. Thanks a lot to them. Thanks a lot to them. And I will give you a little Drupal trick. If you visit the Akia booth, you're going to get a free coupon for a t-shirt in the shop. That's as well good money for the Drupal Association. But on top of that, for every booth visit, Akia is donating $5 to Black Girls Code. Even if you don't want a free t-shirt, please visit us and make Dries spend some money. And the last thing I want to do is I would like to give you a glimpse of the future, or I should say the present. In Akia, we have this vision where we think that having a website is not enough, like it was 10 or 20 years ago. The market is much more competitive, and users demand things like a higher level of personalization for your websites. Customers are aware of that, and they demand partners and ourselves to deliver the full rich digital experiences that those users are demanding. So, we don't want to stop at hosting. We know that this is just the first step. So our teams have been working hard on the products that you can see in the screen. Products like Campaign Studio, personalization, and the customer data platform that is the pillar of all of them. That's what we call the Marketing Cloud. And if you're a developer, I know there are a few here, you are going to love the Drupal Cloud. I don't think it's a secret that in Akia we are 100% Drupalists. And our commitment and our passion is to give you better tools for your daily work with Drupal. The result of that is tools like Migrate to speed up your migrations from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, or Site Studio, a revolutionary low-code tool which is going to empower your front-end marketing teams and decouple their work and give them the freedom that they are demanding. And probably one of my favorites, which is Cloud IDE. Cloud IDE is a super fast local Drupal environment which lives in the cloud and reduces the complexity to set up environments. Things like local performance issues, broken Ansible recipes, all of that is history with Cloud IDE. So please visit the website, or better, visit us in the booth. And to finish my part, let me have some words for the community. I've already said that it's been a particularly difficult year for everyone. I'm not saying anything new. A lot of things are different in DrupalCon this year, but some of them are not. And for example, our community, the Drupal community, we are an example for many other open source projects in the world. And I wanted to call out in particular the people that contribute to make that the way it is, the leadership, from the people in the leading initiatives to the people maintaining contributed modules and everyone in the middle in the community. And if this community is an example, the person that I am introducing is probably the most responsible for this. He's always someone that always finds the time for everyone. He replies to every message, even the most serious and stupid ideas that you can send him. And I'm not saying that I do that a lot. But anyway, moving on. Something interesting as well about him is that people doesn't know that he struggles a little bit with Spanish accents. Although I found that is true with my own particular accent and everyone else. But don't worry, I won't go into details with that. So please, everyone, welcome technical lead and founder of Drupal, founder and CTO of Akia, my boss, Dries Woutert.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm just getting set up here. Um, I wish we were live in Barcelona, but unfortunately, that couldn't be the case. Barcelona is actually one of my favorite cities in the world, and I have a lot of great Drupal memories in Barcelona. But in absence of that, this will be a live presentation, except it won't be from Barcelona. So with that said, I'm ready to go. What I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about how we are optimizing for impact, which I think is a very important part of what we do in the Drupal project. And the way I want to talk about that is by telling you a little bit of stories, things that I wouldn't have guessed when I started Drupal. So I'll go back in time a little bit and talk about why I believe Drupal has a big impact on the world. And so as you probably know, Drupal is almost 20 years old. On January 15th, so in like a month or so, Drupal will turn 20. And on the screen, you actually see a photo of me, like young Dries, where I was giving my very first Drupal presentation. And I was also wearing my very first Drupal t-shirt. They gave it to me just before I walked on stage. Anyway, all of these things, right? Drupal's upcoming birthday, the fact that 2020 is kind of a strange year, the fact that we're close to the holidays, it made me sort of want to reflect on the past. And I asked myself the question, like, what if Drupal didn't exist? What would my life, what would my world look like? And obviously my world would be very, very different. I'd probably be living in Belgium, working for a big bank, writing software or something along those lines. So I'm very fortunate with Drupal and the impact that Drupal has had on my life. Now, the bigger question is probably, what would the world look like without Drupal? It's worth taking a moment to think about that and the impact that Drupal has on so many people around the world. And as you know, Drupal powers a lot of websites across many different industries, and notably, many nonprofits, tens of thousands of nonprofits all around the world use Drupal. And some of them have been using Drupal even to help with COVID-19. And there's many, many stories of that, but I just wanted to highlight one story. And that's the story of a nonprofit in Peru that helped with food distribution to refugees. I'm not sure if you know, but Peru was sort of one of the deadliest COVID hotspots in the world. They were really hit hard, unfortunately. There's also thousands of refugees, typically people from Venezuela, that live in Peru, that make money selling goods on the street. And of course, because of COVID-19, their stream of income, disappeared or almost disappeared. And so there's a nonprofit organization. My Spanish accent isn't very good, so I'm not going to try and read it. But this nonprofit organization, excuse me, they've basically been helping with food distribution. And I was logistically hard. They had to work with spreadsheets and sort of WhatsApp messages, all very manual, and they couldn't scale it very well. And so what they did is they actually built a Drupal site. And on that Drupal site, people could register, they could mark their location on a map, and then they could basically using this Drupal site to coordinate the distribution of food, taking into account people's location, making sure that people don't all pick up their food at the same time, so they could do good scheduling to allow people to keep their distance. And in building this Drupal app and in using this Drupal app, they were able to help 10 times more people. And so it's just an amazing story, one of thousands of stories of how Drupal has been helping people all around the world. And it wasn't just the technology in this case that made it possible. It wasn't just the Drupal project, but it was also the Drupal community. I'm not sure if you know, but actually various people from the Drupal community came together to help build this app. It just goes to show how amazing the Drupal project is. And so I'm very proud to be, helping and supporting and promoting organizations that do such good things in the world. And if you think about it, that's just one example, but there's literally tens of thousands of examples. And I do believe that if Drupal didn't exist today, the world would look a little bit different, And so with that background story, what I wanted to do today is do things a little bit different, as I mentioned. And there's going to be 3 sections to my presentation. First, I want to talk about things that I believe Drupal did right. I want to talk about things that I would do differently. You know, almost 20 years into Drupal, what would I do differently if I were to start over again? And then I want to talk a little bit about things that surprised me, that I didn't expect would happen. All right. And so I'll be talking about these things. And then towards the end of the presentation, Heather Rucker, our executive director of the Drupal Association, she will actually come on stage as well. And she'll be talking about the Drupal Association's action plan. Now, you may wonder, that sounds a little bit random to have Heather come on stage to talk about an action plan. But as you'll see, the action plan actually ties back into what I will be talking about. And so it will all make sense by the end of the presentation. All right, so with that said, let's get going. First section is to talk about things that I believe we did right in the Drupal project. There's a lot of things we did right, otherwise we wouldn't be this large and this successful, but I want to focus on one particular thing, and that is from day one, we've always been innovating. And what you see here on the screen is actually a screenshot of a blog post that I wrote many years ago. I was wishing Drupal a happy birthday, but in the blog post, I actually quoted the original Drupal 1.0 release announcement. And I highlighted a few words that were in that announcement. So we had a modular design, which sounds very common today, but I can tell you at the time that was groundbreaking because every other CMS was very monolithical. We also had features like backend headline generation, not words that we would use today, but eventually that kind of became well known or better known as RSS, right? And so Drupal adopted that before it went mainstream. We also had a feature that we would call public diary module, which eventually became blogging, but it didn't have that name blogging yet. So in many ways, we were blogging before blogging was cool. And so on this slide, what you see here is a timeline of the last 20 years and some of the technologies that have come along. I mean, I could have added dozens and dozens more, but what is remarkable is that Drupal survived through all of these changes. In many ways, we were born in sort of the era of the static web. You know, sites are pretty basic. From there, we evolved into what I call the social web, right? The web became more interactive and eventually social with solutions or platforms like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, Tumblr, you name it. And then a little bit later, we had the mobile web, you know, with the first mobile browser with the iPhone. We also had responsive design all of a sudden, and Drupal adapted that. And of course, today, everything that we do is responsive design, but it's not something that we should take for granted because we had to evolve through all of these things. Years after that, we saw this sprawl of JavaScript tools and frameworks. And actually, if you look all the way to the left, you see jQuery. And I don't know if you know this, but Drupal was the first CMS to adopt jQuery. And we really helped validate jQuery and contributed to its massive adoption. And in doing so, we also helped promote the adoption of JavaScript more broadly. Of course, today, there's all of these different frameworks out there. And then more recently, I think the era that we are in today is what I call the digital experience era. You know, and it's a combination of different things. At the core, it's all about integration and building really seamless experiences online, which is why I use the term digital experience era. But what it means is new channels, like, you know, watches or voice assistants or chatbots or digital kiosks, but also machine learning and AI, but also integrations with e-commerce platforms, with marketing automation solutions, with personalization solutions, you name it. And if you look at the industry, a lot of the proprietary competitors to Drupal, they've been evolving from just being a CMS, you know, just building websites, to digital experience platforms that do a lot more, right? And that's kind of the era that we're in right now. But the great thing about all of this is that not a lot of technologies on the web have survived for 20 years, and even fewer organizations or technologies have thrived and have stayed relevant like Drupal is, right? And so it begs the question, why? Why has Drupal stayed relevant, and why has Drupal thrived over all these years? And I think it's pretty simple answer, actually. But first of all, and this is where it starts, you have to work on things that actually matter to end users. You have to solve a real problem. You can't solve a small problem and expect to, grow as large as Drupal. Second, and very importantly, we were never afraid to embrace new technologies. We were never afraid to evolve with the, with the technology landscape. Now, last but not least, we actually made it easy for end users to adopt the technology. That may sound a little bit funny because we talk so much about usability and how we have much work to do around usability. But for many, many years, especially in the first, call it 10 to 15 years of Drupal, the fact that Drupal was open source and is open source, obviously, is what made it so easy to adopt. Right? Like, you didn't have to buy a license. You didn't have to go through a sales process and have sales meetings. You could just download and install Drupal. And that was incredibly, and still is, incredibly empowering, and in stark contrast with sort of traditional software. Now, in the last few years, that has changed a little bit. SaaS software is everywhere, and SaaS software often has like free trials. And so that ease of use, that advantage that we had, has disappeared or softened somewhat. And that's why we're very focused on other usability improvements in Drupal. But these three things, I believe, is why we have, thrived over 20 years. And so this is a chart, it's kind of a classic chart of how technology evolves. And what you see is 4 example waves of technologies. And each wave, you can see there's kind of a slow start, followed by fast adoption in the middle, and then the technology peaks, right? And while the technology peaks, you kind of have to make the leap to the next technology, right? As it takes off, you have to make the jump. And in order to stay relevant, we have to keep making these jumps, right? And so today, we can look at this chart and map it onto the previous slides that I showed, right? In our world, these waves could map to the static web, the dynamic web, the mobile web, and the digital experience era. And then in order to stay relevant, what do we have to do? Well, I think there's a whole bunch of things we have to do, but I think it comes down to integrated solutions, bringing all of these different technologies together. Websites aren't standalone applications anymore. They're integrated solutions, part of a bigger stack. And that's where decoupled and headless architectures are so important. And fortunately, we have a great story around headless and decoupled. We've made that bet many years ago, and that's now starting to pay off. We are recognized as a leader in headless and decoupled. Another big part is composable or reusable content. And again, this is something that we've had for over a decade with things like CCK and views. We've had it for many, many years. And guess what? It continues to become more and more and more relevant. It's growing into us, if you will. And then there's all these different channels that I mentioned, or modalities, if you want to call it that. And we're good at that too, because of headless and decoupled. And to some extent, JavaScript is also an important part of that, because a lot of applications want to be more, dynamic and application-like, I guess. And so overall, Drupal is really, really well positioned, for this era, which is great news. Now, there's some things we have to do. We have some legacy JavaScript. We want to add more web service coverage. But overall, I think we're in a really good position for the next, several years. Now, the other big thing that's continuing to happen is that JavaScript continues to grow very quickly. In fact, that growth is accelerating. You can see that on these charts. We now have explosive growth, I would call it, for React and Vue and other frameworks. And fortunately, again, Drupal can be used with all of these frameworks. And again, there is always things we can do better as well. We're never done, right? And so these two big trends, if you want, you can call it the fourth wave of the web or this digital experience era, as well as this explosive growth of JavaScript, actually has led me to propose the JavaScript menu component initiative at DrupalCon Global, the previous DrupalCon, I think 4 months or so ago, maybe 5 months. And the mission that I proposed is to provide the best way for JavaScript frontends to consume configurable menus managed in Drupal. All right, that may sound specific, and it is, but we picked menus because almost every site or every application has menus. And so it's a very usable component. It's also a component with a lot of complexity, quite frankly. And so I showed this image of the mountain. I guess I use a lot of mountain slides. But at the bottom of the mountain, you can see a set of capabilities or things that we need to do that are specific to building a menu component, right? Like you have to manage hierarchies of menu items. There is menu items defined by code, programmatic or module-defined menu items. There's also user-defined menu items. These are menus entered by a user of Drupal through the admin UI. You have to deal with routing and path aliases, all of these things. But then at the top of the mountain, you see things that aren't quite specific to menu items. I mean, these are things that we have to do for any component that we would build. And part of the mission was to go solve these things. And the reason why we wanted to solve these things is because that will open the floodgates, if you will, to building not just one component for menus, but for building hundreds of components over time, right? And so that was secretly, or not so secretly, the real mission of this initiative is to figure out how we can have many components in Drupal and to use the menu component to sort of create a path for others, right? And so the real mission is all about how do we become the best decoupled or headless CMS? And how do we have many JavaScript integrations, not just one? And so I put that challenge out there at the previous DrupalCon. We've actually seen some great momentum and progress on it. And so what I wanted to do next is show you a video to show you how far we've come in just 4 or 5 months or so. So let's take a look.
Hello everyone, I'm Gabe Solis, one of the coordinators for the Decoupled Menus Initiative. I'd like to provide you with an update on what our team has been working on since Dries recommended this initiative at DrupalCon Global. But first, let's quickly recap what the initiative is all about. The idea for this initiative is to work toward 2 goals. The first, give Drupal the best JavaScript developer experience of any CMS. The second, make Drupal the best decoupled CMS overall. To achieve the first goal, we need to establish a pattern for building, shipping, and maintaining JavaScript packages, and then we need to make sure that those packages are high quality and easy to use. To achieve the second goal, we also need to provide an excellent non-developer experience, even in a decoupled architecture. Today, fully decoupled architectures must sacrifice the non-developer experience, or spend lots of time and resources to restore the features that you get out of the box in a more traditional, non-decoupled architecture. Since both of these goals are quite ambitious, Dries suggested that we focus on a single use case, a JavaScript menu component. In doing so, we would establish a pattern that we can repeat until we've achieved success. So, how are we doing and what have we been up to? Well, we've been putting our team together, validating the idea, and doing research and discovery. I'm happy to say that we have put together an awesome team of new and existing Drupal contributors. We've also validated the initiative idea and officially launched it as a Drupal core strategic initiative. What I'm most pleased with is that through our research and discovery, we've already got 2 really exciting things to show you. The first is that we wrote an RFC draft that standardizes how Drupal will manage standalone JavaScript packages. It covers many important topics that we believe will make our work a great contribution to the JavaScript ecosystem. Things like security coverage, stable releases, changelogs, continuous integration, code styles, and more. What we built is a hypothetical DrupalCon web app. It serves as a reference single-page JavaScript application. As you can see here, we have a menu at the top of the screen. Without web services for decoupled menus in Drupal core, JavaScript developers are often forced to hard-code menu items like these into their applications. That means that every time a non-developer wants to change a menu item, a developer has to get involved. That developer must make the change in code, then rebuild the JavaScript application, and then must deploy those changes to production. These many steps mean that even simple changes can take hours or even days to complete, depending on the developer's availability and the complexity of the deployment process. Our reference application showed that by providing menu items via Drupal's JSON API, these deployment steps could be completely eliminated, and that a core JavaScript package could even reduce the lines of code that a JS developer has to write in the first place. This simple use menu React hook could be one of the core JavaScript packages that Drupal eventually publishes in order to improve the JS developer experience. Now, let's try following this logout link. Notice that it updates to a login link as soon as I do. That's because this is a module-defined menu link that's aware of the current user's authentication status. If we look at the backend for this menu, we can see some other module-defined and user-defined menu items. This home menu link is a module-defined menu item too. Let's try enabling it. As expected, it appears as soon as we refresh the app. This simple change that would have taken a coordinated effort to make if it were hard-coded takes only a click of a button, even in this fully decoupled architecture. What about menu hierarchies? The reference app can handle those as well. Let's reclaim some screen real estate by nesting these 3 track links into a dropdown. First, we'll need to create a text-only menu item that doesn't link to anything. Then, we use the existing Drupal menu UI to nest our 3 tracks underneath it. Again, we can refresh the app and the changes work as expected. You may recognize that we didn't build our own menu component. This component is actually using the React Bootstrap navbar. That highlights a very important change that we made in this discovery phase. We realized that, at this point in time, Drupal shouldn't be trying to reinvent the wheel by creating our own components with markup and styles. Instead, we should integrate well with the vibrant ecosystem of visual components that already exist, so that it's easy for front-end developers to create and implement a unique look and feel for their projects. What about user-defined menu items and routing? Let's see what that could look like by creating a new basic page for our application. Since this is a DrupalCon app, let's embed video of the Dries node. We'll create a menu item right here on the node edit form and label it Watch Live. We'll also give it a custom URL alias. Sure enough, as soon as we refresh the app, our menu item appears. If we follow that link, it indeed respects our custom URL alias even in this single page application using React Router, a popular client-side routing library. What happens when the Dries node is no longer live? Could a non-developer make that change on the fly? While it wasn't on the original list of foreseen challenges, we also validated that these menus work with Drupal's access control and publishing workflows. All we have to do is unpublish the node. Since we followed that logout link earlier, the menu item will automatically disappear once we navigate to a different page, since we no longer have access to it as an anonymous visitor. As you can see, we've been working on some really cool and exciting things. We have a few next steps. What you saw in this demo isn't relying on very much new code at all, but there are a few minor changes that we need to get committed to core in order to add menu data to its HTTP APIs. The use menu React hook is only a proof of concept. We want to build and ship JavaScript packages that are well documented, production ready, and continuously tested. Just last week, we made our first commits to the repository that will become the first official Drupal core JavaScript package. We also need to drive the RFC draft to adoption. We're happy to report that we're already working with the Drupal security team, the Drupal core committer team, and the Drupal Association to make all of it happen. Last, but definitely not least, we want your help. If you're interested in this project and want to volunteer or follow our progress, please come join us in Drupal Slack in the Decoupled Menus Initiative channel. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.
Awesome. Like if this were an in-person event, this is where there would be cheering and people would, be excited and, and rightfully so, right? Like this is pretty impressive demo in a short amount of time. The big deal about this, in my opinion, is that the experience, the developer experience and the marketer experience or the content creator experience is actually better than that of our competitors. It's better than Contentful if we can pull this off, which is exciting. So as you could see, even though it was a proof of concept, we kind of showed you a lot of the things here up on the mountain track, indicated in white. But as we also learned, or maybe confirmed is a better word, is that the menu-specific code wasn't really the hard part. The hard part is the things that are ahead of us up on the mountain, the things that are maybe not specific to menus, but those things related to release management, testing, documentation, security, all of those things are important things. We're actively figuring these out with the help of the Drupal Association, the security team, and many other people. So lots of great progress. So really, to wrap up this section, one of the things that we did is we renamed the initiative. So it's no longer called the JavaScript Menu Component Initiative, but instead it will be called the Decoupled Menus Initiative. And that's simply because, as Gabe explained, we realized we actually don't have to build the components ourselves. Really great components exist. All we need to do is write some library code, if you will, to integrate with these components. So we felt this was a more appropriate name. As Gabe mentioned, we've put together a great team of people. Lots of people are helping. Here are some of the people that have been involved. We've had weekly meetings. You're more than invited to join these meetings as well. But then one thing that Gabe didn't mention, and that I'm excited to announce today, is that we're actually promoting, if you will, 2 people from that team, Justafish or Sally and Nod or Theodore, to become 2 new core committers. And that's a big deal because the core committer team is quite small, but adding 2 JavaScript focused core committers is really going to help us here and hopefully demonstrates our commitment JavaScript architectures in Drupal. So I'm very excited about that. Welcome to the team, Justafish and Nod. All right, so to wrap up, this section, something that we did right is to solve important problems that really mattered, that were relevant, and be not afraid to embrace technical innovation, right? And so we're continuing to do that with this initiative, and I'm very excited about it. Now, there's other Drupal 10 initiatives. I talked about these in my previous Dries note when we launched them. I won't give a detailed update on these here, but overall, they're actually tracking well, right? 3 of the 5 are green, which means they're really doing well. And 2 out of the 5 are yellow. So easy out of the box, there's some really great work going on Claro and other parts, but we do need a little bit more help with Layout Builder and Media Management to make those the default out of the box solutions. Drupal 10 readiness is a similar story. Lots of great things happening with Symfony support, PHP 8 support, you name it. But we do also have some gaps where we need more help with jQuery as well as CK Editor. So looking for people to help us with these. For more details, there was actually a dedicated session at this DrupalCon yesterday where each of the initiatives presented sort of their status and also ways for all of you to get involved. So I would encourage you to check out that session. It was recorded and these recordings will be made available. So definitely go check that out. All right, so that was kind of the first section. Next, I want to move on to things that I would have done differently. If I could start over again, what would I change, right? And so the first item is all about a focus on ease of use. So the screenshot that you see here is, again, a screenshot from a blog post that I wrote where I kind of, said that for the longest time, I was so focused on the purity of the code, writing like beautiful code, and I completely neglected ease of use as well as, look and feel. And I regret that basically. And on this screenshot that I'm showing now, it's actually a screenshot of what the Drupal backend UI looked like. It's kind of hard to see because I couldn't find a better screenshot, a bigger screenshot, because it's probably 18 years old or something. But if you pay really close attention to the screenshot, you can see that the links at the top, that represents the administration menu that we had at the time. But if you pay close attention, you can see that they're actually sorted alphabetically. So basically, there's almost no organization to it other than sorting them alphabetically. And it's a great example of how I ignored ease of use or user experience, right? And, what happened is that, Drupal, the Drupal project attracted other developers, people also interested in sort of that purity of the code. And that led to some singular thinking. And for the longest time, Drupal was built by developers for developers. And in some ways, we're still kind of suffering from that tunnel vision, frankly. And fortunately, today, we're a lot more focused on end users, but it took a while. It took a long time to break out of that mindset. And there was some drama along the way when we decided to focus on ease of use. Like, people didn't like it. It's hard to maybe believe now, but at the time, that was very much the case. And so the big lesson learned is that it doesn't really matter which technology is the best or is the most pure. In the end, it's all about the end user experience. It also doesn't matter who came first or second. Like WordPress, in my opinion, is obviously more widely used, but I'm very convinced that Drupal is actually technically better. And so it's a great example of that as well, right? So in the end, it's all about the end user experience. And so one thing that I would do differently is that I would try to be what I call be compelling beyond code, which means we have to think about promotion and marketing, branding. Fortunately, we have a new logo, but also about the ease of use of the product. And that includes great documentation, that includes a great installation experience, et cetera, right? And so we have made that transition. I think there's more work to be done, but definitely a lesson learned for me personally, and hopefully one that we can all take to heart. The second thing that I would do differently has to do with how open source is developed. And to explain that, I actually have to go back in time a little bit. But open source, 25 years ago or so, was really a renegade movement. It was a rejection of all things proprietary, rooted in a strong desire for personal freedom. And in my case, I got involved with open source like 22, 23 years ago. I was very excited about that. I wanted to be part of that movement. But after a few years in Drupal, what we saw is that we started to see companies involved with Drupal. People built digital agencies, Drupal shops around Drupal, and we ended up actually with a healthy commercial ecosystem around Drupal. And I saw the advantages of that. I saw how that would help drive Drupal's adoption, and I actually really encouraged it and helped promote the commercial ecosystem. But it wasn't always easy for the community. I remember when we hired our first full-time paid contributors. I think it was Jacob Redding at the Drupal Association or Neil Drum. These were amongst the first hires ever. And it caused like a shockwave in the Drupal community. People thought we had ruined the project because people were working on Drupal full-time and getting paid to work on Drupal. Or I remember how Drupal would fail once I announced that I had raised $7 million to start a company around Drupal Acquia. People were really freaked out about that. And so in many ways, we saw kind of like the rejection of commercial interest. But to me, too many people confuse commercial efforts with proprietary efforts. We have to be thoughtful about how we think about these things. And even today, commercial interest still gets some backlash. But in my mind, if you look at the history of Drupal, the commercial interest in Drupal has actually allowed us to grow much faster. I think it really helped us sustain the project, and you can see that on this chart. And actually today, 2/3 of all of the contributions are sponsored, meaning paid for by organizations. And so in a way, it's probably fair to say that we're dependent now on those commercial sponsors, right? Like, what would the world look like without them today? And so commercial interests, I think, are actually really valuable for all these reasons, but also for other reasons. Like, commercial interests allow us to be a more diverse and inclusive community, because not everybody can contribute in their free time. Free time is still a privilege. Not everybody has it, so not everybody can contribute on their free time. Obviously, today, we have contributions coming from a lot of different organizations, over 1,000, actually over 1,100 different organizations. And that's super healthy that we have that many people, that many organizations involved. And all of that actually led me to take an even stronger stance, something that I started talking about 1 or 2 years ago, which is that I believe we need to not only encourage commercial interest, but we should actually actively reward the makers, right? If we want to maximize contribution, we should promote and reward the makers. And the makers are those organizations who contribute back to Drupal. And this in contrast with takers who don't contribute to Drupal or contribute maybe very, very little. And we must reward the makers to encourage them to invest more. And it's kind of the equivalent to, shopping local. I'm sure you've seen that in your local community, but to help sustain a community, whether it's your local community or the Drupal community, we need to encourage end users to do business with the makers, right? That's how you sustain those communities. And it also means steering away business from takers to discourage them. And importantly, while we do that, we obviously have to work with the takers and encourage them to become makers, right? And so for me, that's really kind of my second thing that I would do differently, is to embrace that faster. And, looking back, I see all the value that comes from having a healthy and balanced ecosystem with volunteers and organizations contributing. But I also recognize that for organizations to contribute, there's things that we can do to help reward them for that behavior. All right, so that's the two big things that I would do differently. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about things that surprised me. Before I do, I wanted to show you a quick, 1 minute video. So please take a look.
I have a concept that I go back to, and it's a concept that should be familiar to everybody since the beginning of human history. It's the idea of the commons. This shared place in the center of town square, the quad, but it's the place where you come together, your community, and you can listen to people on soapboxes with different ideas, and you can be very different, but you come together because together we're stronger than being apart. And today when I think of the commons, I extend it to kind of the resources we all share, collectively owned, like the air we breathe. I think of schools, parks. I think of the intelligence we share. We can share in libraries or the internet. And I think the internet's important. In this digital age, that shared humanity, that access to be together in the commons is at our fingertips. But we're not using it that way. We're not coming together. To choose that path towards the commons and to be with each other, you also have to choose love. That's a hard thing. But I know you can't go to the town square filled with hate for the town. You can't lead a people you don't love. You can't lead a country you don't love. And I don't think you can change the world and say, I'm only going to change it for the people just like me, my own circle of friends, not for the people I hate, not for them. It doesn't work.
So this is just a snippet of a great presentation. I encourage you to watch it. I wanted to play the video because when I watched it, it got me thinking. It got me thinking about a whole bunch of things, actually. But it also really got me thinking about the evolution of my why. Why do I do what I do, right? And if I think about that, the reason I'm part of the Drupal project is for a number of different reasons. Like when I started Drupal, I just wanted to learn PHP and MySQL. I wanted to build something for me and a handful of friends. So I built it for myself. But as Drupal started to grow, I started to care more about other people contributing to Drupal. So all of a sudden, I was caring about code contributors, which is basically people like me. And over time, I started caring about end users. We talked a little bit about that, right? And today, I actually care about what I call non-users, which is interesting, right? Because non-users are people that have never used Drupal and frankly may never use Drupal ever. But I still care about those people because of things like the open web. It's about making the web open and making sure it remains open, right? So that's an example of caring about non-users. But the big thing here is that over time, for me personally, making an impact on others became more and more important. The other realization that comes with that for me is that everybody's why is deeply personal, and everybody's why can be different. And also everybody's why, like my why, can evolve over time. And that's in a way kind of the messy part when we talk about our purpose or our why, right? Like there's maybe not one why. It's hard to define a singular why. And today, when I think about my why, they're all still there. And that's the interesting part to me. You know, I still do Drupal for myself because I'm still learning so much from Drupal. And that was my original why, to learn about new technologies. But I do Drupal because it's my livelihood. You know, I've been getting paid, if you will, to do Drupal for 13, 14 years. I love being part of a community. And I'm very interested in being part of the future of the web, building software that everyone can use. So all of these things are compounding for me in a way. So there's not a single reason. It's a combination of all of these reasons. And as you know, Nisha said in the video clip that I showed, you know, you can't come to the town square with hate in your heart. I mean, I love that sentence. And I think of Drupal as sort of the ultimate town square. You know, Drupal is the commons that she references. And my big takeaway is that you can't really make global change without caring for everyone or almost everyone. You know, you can't lead a people you don't love, she said, which was so beautiful. And so to maximize impact, you have to care for people you don't know. And ultimately, if we have to pick a why, if we have to pick a purpose, I think that's what we have to pick, right? We have to pick the fact that we care for the web, that we want to build an open web, a web for all. Because the web impacts everyone. It's a part of modern life. You know, it's a key component of education, of communication, of collaboration, of business, of entertainment, of society as a whole. And so we have to build a web for everyone, like literally everyone. You know, and I think we have a big role to play in that as one of the largest open source content management systems. And so web for all, I think, is a really important goal. It's worthy our time and our attention and our commitment, because it doesn't only help everybody that's sort of around today, it helps everybody that's about to come online and get access to the internet. And it's helping everyone that comes after us, frankly, too, like our children and our grandchildren, these kinds of things. And needless to say, diversity and inclusion are also a big part of that, right? And so that's kind of sort of my second point here. You know, as I mentioned, something that I didn't expect it, right? Because that's the topic here. But as I mentioned, I started Drupal thinking just about myself. And I think that was okay, right? Because I was scratching my own itch. And I didn't really think about diversity and inclusion. I literally didn't think about it. I was building Drupal for myself and for the people closest to me. And ultimately, I actually made a bad joke, a sexist joke at DrupalCon Copenhagen 2007, like, 13, 14 years ago. And, I got called out by a few people in the audience and after my keynote, and specifically called out by people, I would say, not from Europe. And at first, I was kind of frustrated by that. And I kind of said, I mean, it's political correctness. But what I've learned since is that those jokes, they actually hurt people. I hurt people's feelings. And I felt really bad about that. I felt awful that I hurt people's feelings. And I apologized, obviously. But it's when I understood that joke kind of was exclusive, like it excluded people. And so I finally understood that it had nothing to do with political correctness. And that's when I started to realize over time, didn't come like in one flash, but over time I started to realize that diversity and inclusion really, really matters. That in order to build a web for everyone, everybody needs to be part of building Drupal. It has to be that way, or it doesn't work otherwise. And so we have to care for and love everyone, or almost everyone. And that's why I'm so proud of the work that we're doing now, and there's so many examples, but I'm proud of the focus on accessibility within the Drupal project, and the fact that we take that serious. I'm also excited about all sorts of features that we launch that help, like Drupal 9.1, which we just released. We have lazy loading of images. It may sound like a small feature, but it actually helps people with slower internet connections, and that's awesome. That helps us be more inclusive and embraces that diversity. And it's also why I'm happy to see more sponsored development, frankly, because as I mentioned, free time is still a privilege for many. And that's all of this is not something that I understood 20 years ago, not even 15 years ago. So it took me a while to understand it. And so looking back, that definitely surprised me, right? And so if I think about the things that surprised me, is that I didn't expect to be caring about the open web when I started Drupal, and I didn't expect to be focused on helping to cultivate a diverse and inclusive community. And so to wrap up my presentation and to put it all together, if we want to optimize for impact, which I want to do, and I hope we all want to do, we have to solve real problems, and we should continue to embrace innovation and new technologies. But we also need to maximize our speed. We need to go fast as a project, and to go fast, we need to reward the makers. It's something that we really have to start doing more of. It's not enough to have a great product or great technology. You also have to be compelling beyond code. You have to advocate it. You have to promote it. You have to market it. You have to make it easy to adopt, right? We have to focus on a web for all with accessibility in mind and all of these things. And last but not least, the only way we're going to be able to do that and truly maximize our impact is to also build and cultivate a very diverse and inclusive community. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. I'm sure some of you may say, well, it's all nice, but what are we actually going to do about it, right? And I think that's a fair question. Now, we have been working on this, and Heather Rocker from the Drupal Association will join us on the virtual stage. But Heather and her staff and the board of directors, including myself, we've been working the last few months on sort of an action plan for the Drupal Association. And she's going to talk a little bit about that. And I think you'll see how it ties into some of the things that I just spoke about. So without further ado, Heather, welcome to the stage.
Yay, I remembered to unmute. Thank you, Dries. And if you don't mind, don't leave backstage, because I'd actually like to bring you back when I'm done in just a few minutes so that we can chat about some of the things that you talked about and how everything ties together. So stay put.
I'll be here.
And I'll bring you right back. Okay, great. All right, well, thanks again, Dries, for sharing your why with us. We at the Drupal Association have been focused on our why as part of our strategic planning this year as well. And so before I get to the Drupal Association's why, I'd really like to talk about my personal why, just to tag into a little bit of what Dries talked about and how it applies to my work with Drupal in leading the Drupal Association. As I mentioned at NEDCamp last month, I believe Drupal has the potential to create positive impact in the world. For me, my personal values and my professional talents really align best when I'm working with purpose toward a mission. And I've had a chance this year to see just how much Drupal enables those doing good work, allowing them to do it both efficiently and effectively. I'm also driven by the opportunity for all of us to serve as Drupal ambassadors. We really have an opportunity to make connections and partnerships around the world, not only to empower organizations through open source, but to empower individual careers as well. So the local associations and organizations you see on this slide partnered with us at the Drupal Association to recruit over 150 DrupalCon scholarship attendees this summer, most of whom were new to Drupal. So these are the moments that inspire me to push ahead, and I hope that they inspire you as a community as well. So if we talk about our Drupal Association vision, which the vision for an organization is the ultimate goal, right? And ours is ultimately a safe, secure, and open web for everyone. So we get there through our mission, which is to accelerate the Drupal project and support the growth of our Drupal community. Once you know your why, you have to figure out the how. So this year, as Dries mentioned, I had the opportunity to collaborate with our board of directors to create a 3-year roadmap for our work. And what this is going to do is give us additional focus and energy around how we meet our mission. I'll talk more about how we're already putting this strategic plan into motion in just a bit. First, I want to take a moment to give thanks to our supporting partners. Funding from these organizations is critical in supporting the non-DrupalCon work that we do, which includes supporting the development of Drupal 9 and getting ready for Drupal 10, maintaining Drupal.org, funding infrastructure and contribution testing fees, emphasizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, enabling contribution and expanding the types of contribution that get recognized, and collaborating with various Drupal working groups, like the security working group, which helps keep the project secure. So thank you again to our supporting partners that make this work possible. Again, this is an opportunity for anyone who might not be a supporting organization at this time, but is interested. You can reach us at partnerships@association.drupal.org. And we can't talk about support without talking about Drupal Cares. So the Drupal Association, along with so many other organizations, was deeply impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Earlier this year, we had a lot of difficult community conversations about what the project would look like if the Drupal Association wasn't able to exist anymore because of that impact. As we worked through every possible financial scenario, we got a clear signal from you, the community, that you stood by ready to help. And the Drupal Cares emergency fundraising campaign was born. Early into the launch of Drupal Cares, Dries and his wife Vanessa gave an incredible pledge of support to encourage other donations. Then a group of dedicated Drupal business leaders came together to make the campaign even better. This group announced the launch of yet another matching gift challenge, which made every individual cash donation and new or renewed membership have triple the impact. Community members got creative, and we saw wonderful projects emerge to support the cause. Every action mattered. Every donation, every message of support, every membership. You made a difference, and you ensured that we met the Drupal Cares emergency fundraising goal in record time. You demonstrated once again the power of the Drupal community, the sustainability of Drupal, and the importance of open source. And thanks to all of that support, we were able to keep working on the things that matter most. So I want to highlight a bit of what the Drupal Association has accomplished this year in support of project innovation and contribution enablement, despite the daunting challenges of 2020. As we like to say at the Drupal Association, we build the tools to help you, the community, build Drupal. And as you can see, with all the individuals and organizations contributing, we're one of the most active open source projects in the world. This spring, we released the new Evergreen Drupal logo. It was designed to support the Drupal 9 launch and beyond. And not only did Drupal 9 launch, but it launched in the earliest of 3 projected release windows on June 3rd of this year, marking an incredible accomplishment for all involved. Our community of innovation, as I like to look at it, is fueled by collective wisdom and contribution. And the launch of Drupal 9 on time and in a year of crisis is an example of that amazing collective effort. Here's a quick look at the global contribution to Drupal 9. And since we're at DrupalCon Europe, I want to say a special thank you to Europe for your continued leadership as contributors. You can see that in this pie chart, you're a major part of the success of Drupal 9. So one initiative we're incredibly proud to celebrate is the launch of merge requests on Drupal.org. The Drupal.org merge request feature gives contributors a more advanced modern workflow and should make it easier for developers familiar with GitHub, GitLab, or other tools who want to join the Drupal community. Issue forks and merge requests have only been available for about a month now, and yet we're seeing contribution accelerate as a result of that implementation. It's been inspiring. I've seen Twitter threads and heard stories of people who haven't contributed in years that are coming back to join into Drupal again. I'm also hearing about contributors who are diving in where previously they were too intimidated or unfamiliar with the patch workflows before. So this is an incredible win and one that took years of Drupal association and community effort. So thank you to everyone who provided feedback along the way, helped with testing, and to those using it now to make Drupal the best CMS on the web. If you've not contributed to Drupal before, now is your time. There are contribution mentors here at DrupalCon Europe all week who can help you get started. Please take a moment to visit their booth at the exhibit hall to get connected to next steps. I'm also really proud that we launched the Drupal Steward program. So if you don't know, Drupal Steward is a joint program between the Drupal security team and the Drupal Association. It offers a web application firewall that protects sites from certain highly critical and mass exploitable vulnerabilities. Easy for me to say, right? Not so much. It gives you the chance to update sites on your time when it's more convenient. So it really allows you to manage your teams in a healthy, non-panicked way when it comes to security updates. Our Drupal Steward founding partners from our platform level are Acquia and Pantheon. So those organizations are now able to deploy Drupal Steward protection across their entire customer base. That said, through our community tier and our agency partner program, we're also able to provide Drupal Steward directly for those partners who want to protect their client sites and for those that want to buy it directly as site owners. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to this URL to set up a consultation. And in case you're worried that getting started is difficult, we've seen site owners activate with as little as a 20-minute phone call. So now that we've had a chance to look back at 2020 highlights, I want to switch gears and talk about what's next. As I mentioned earlier, we recently crafted a 3-year strategic plan to focus the work of the association in order to provide maximum impact for Drupal. I'd like to provide an overview of these projects we already have in motion to support these strategic goals. You'll notice that many of them align to the imperatives that Dries just mentioned in alignment with success for Drupal. First, let's talk about diversity and inclusion. We know we have an issue in open source, and I'm really committed that it's time for all of us to take action. There's a clear business case for making diversity and inclusion a priority. This work is important to Drupal's success and needs to be a collaborative effort across our entire community. And I do want to thank those leading the way, including Drupal Diversity and Inclusion and all of the individuals, organizations, and agencies that are making diversity and inclusion a priority in your workplace. One way that we are supporting this goal is through a community-driven program to provide Drupal talent development with an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. So you'll see a little information here. And what we are doing is working with the community to develop a pilot program for talent development, which is going to include 3 career pathways for the pilot. And that's going to be front-end developer, site builder, and back-end developer. Thank you to all the Drupal organizations that answered our call for collaboration. Since this group is currently representative of North America, we would love to add training organizations from other regions around the world to expand our reach. Please contact us if you're interested in serving as one of our training partners. It's fun. We have a good time as a group. It's a great volunteer experience, and I think you'll get a lot out of the program. And if you'd like to donate to the program, which helps get it off the ground as well, or serve as a volunteer, please let us know. And let us know quickly, because we're actually pushing toward launching this program in the first cohort of students in the first quarter of 2021. So as Dries mentioned, the need to maximize the speed of innovation by rewarding makers to optimize impact is important. So we've created an extension of the Drupal Association Supporting Partner Program, which we call the Drupal Certified Partner Program. And this is established to recognize and promote companies for both their expertise and their contribution to the project. This program also has a focus on improving the end user journey through enhancements both on Drupal.org. So literally when they get to Drupal.org, how do we make a more robust experience for someone evaluating Drupal? But we're also adding customized evaluation consultations by the Drupal Association on behalf of these Drupal certified partners. So there's more inclusive matchmaking when it comes to those evaluators, and we're going to be putting in more work from a person perspective to make sure that they get what they need from an information and partner matching perspective. So we heard you. Sometimes it's hard to know what's happening across all of Drupal. This week, we launched a new communication to help solve part of this problem. It was created to help both current and potential contributors find your ideal place to engage with the Drupal project. We want to help you find the best opportunity and the best use of your skills and talents, while ideally developing new skills and talents along the way. We do hope you'll take a moment to look at the initiative update found in the community blog area of Drupal.org, and we really would like to get some of your feedback about how we can iterate on this communication moving forward. As we also heard from Dries, there are important initiatives underway to support the future of the Drupal platform. More than ever, the Drupal Association is directly involved in many of these initiatives, primarily to support the initiative teams in their work. I'd like to talk about some milestones we've achieved, some work that's still in progress, and what we have planned for each of these initiatives. In recent years, there's been an increased focus on Drupal's front end and on ease of use in general. To help our front end developers work more efficiently, Drupal core issues will now automatically generate a live deployment preview whenever a merge request is opened. We want to thank the Tugboat QA team, who power both these core deployment previews and the Simply Test Me service for their partnership in making this happen. You can see how live previews work here. On any Drupal core issue with an open merge request, you'll see a View Live Preview button. When you click on the Live Preview button, it will take you to an automatically generated Drupal site preview, where your merge request is already applied. We hope this helps you review core contributions more easily. It feels like just yesterday we were celebrating the release of Drupal 9, but of course Drupal 10 is just around the corner. So this is an area where much collaboration is happening behind the scenes between the Drupal release managers and the Drupal Association team. And I'm pleased to say that the tooling is ready to support what we need to make Drupal 10 a success. And if future requirements appear, we're ready to meet those as well. On the subject of Drupal 10 readiness, though, as some of you may know, there are still significant parts of Drupal that use jQuery 3. There's been a long-running proposal to deprecate those usages in favor of a more modern JavaScript, but it's been hard to gain traction. We want to partner with current contributors interested in deprecating jQuery, and we're also looking for sponsorship of this work, all to ensure that it's ready by the time we need to launch Drupal 10. The Automated Updates initiative is one that we actually took an early interest in, and that's because updates to Drupal software have always been packaged and delivered as a service by the Drupal Association team. So last year, as you may remember, we began this process by creating a contributed module prototype with support from the European Commission and Tag1 Consulting. But to go beyond that contrib prototype, we had to deal with composer dependencies. And Composer 1, as many of you may know, had both slow performance and high memory usage. So I'm thrilled to say that Drupal.org's Composer endpoints now fully support using Composer 2, which means it's much, much faster and much more memory efficient. So what does all that mean? It means site owners can build and update their sites more quickly. Automated testing that depends on Composer runs faster, and the possibility of running Composer updates during automatic updates of Drupal is now much more achievable. In the first quarter of 2021, we hope to have the secure signing infrastructure updated for the new requirements so that Drupal core can work towards validating signed updates in the core update manager. This initiative will make Drupal site ownership both easier and more secure, and will be a tremendous leap forward for the project. So last, but certainly not least, I want to talk about the Decoupled Menus initiative that Dries mentioned earlier. So the Drupal Association is putting this initiative toward the top of our engineering priorities for the coming year. Our goal is to make the Drupal.org and GitLab tooling as robust as it can be, not only for PHP code, but for JavaScript, and frankly, any other language that we may want to use in the future. We're working closely with the initiative team to create the best tooling possible, which is going to allow Drupal to expand to these new ecosystems while remaining a unified community. And I do think it's worth mentioning that unity of housing a single Drupal project, all collaborating together on Drupal.org is one of our fundamental strengths, and that's why we're approaching the project in this way. So with that, I would love to give you some opportunities to reach out to us if you have any questions about what I mentioned. So there's a Drupal.org panel immediately following this session. There's a Dries Note Q&A where Dries and I will be available to do a deep dive. It happens in about an hour. So if you've got any questions about what we talked about today, that's an excellent opportunity. And there's a Q&A with the Drupal Association tomorrow. And that'll actually be a blend of board members and staff. All of those are opportunities to learn a little more, ask questions you may have, or find a way that you want to engage in the parts that are meaningful to you. So with that, I would love to bring Dries back because I have a couple questions I want to ask you too.
I'm back.
All right.
Great.
Thank you. You make it look so easy. So one thing that's come up, and again, some of these are conversations we've been having with community stakeholders, and some of this information is new. But given that contribution enablement is such an important goal, Dries, for both you from a project perspective and for us as a Drupal association, how do we know when we're successful? And what do we do beyond what we talked about today potentially as well?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I can give you my personal answer to that question, but I think we should measure the output. You know, like enabling contribution is in a way like it's very important, but it's kind of an input, but the output is actually the innovation, let's say, that comes out of Drupal in my mind, right? So how I would measure success is that we see Drupal accelerate from an innovation point of view, and ultimately the output of that is more and more adoption. So
right.
That's how I look at it, but it's easier to measure inputs sometimes. So I mean, in terms of number of people contributing, I would love to see us make dramatic increases there, honestly. You know, like if I think about how many people contribute today, obviously there's over 8,000 people that contributed sort of in the last 12 months, which is an incredible number, right? At the same time, if you look at the data, the top 30 people, which is like what, the top 0.02% or something. My math isn't this good on the fly, but like a fraction of these 8,000 people, like 30 people, they do like 20% of the work. So there's an incredible long tail of those top 30 people. I don't know, I'm guessing, but maybe 20 are full-time. But I would love to see us go to 200 full-time people, you know? And so that's a 10x
Right.
increase. Like, how do we go from 20 to 200? And for me, if I take 5 steps back and I look at our competitors, let's say they have 200 people full-time. And obviously we don't need to measure only full-time people because we have 8,000 non-full-time people, which is really valuable, and they do a lot of work too. But yeah, basically long-winded story here, but I would love to see us really make some dramatic changes, not incremental or small changes.
And I know the team at the Drupal Association and I and the board and Dries, you've been part of some of those conversations about, okay, but how do we affect that kind of dramatic increase? And what does that mean, especially for us as the association? You know, what are the new kind of business focuses that we need to have to make sure that we're doing what we can to do there? So I know I've got some ideas about how we create more of that. And you talked about some things today, some ideas, and I was able to show a little bit of what we've already got in motion. But are there things you think about or that you see in other communities, or, you know, are there things that are on your mind or that we should emulate to get there faster?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things we have to do or could do. And so rewarding makers is one path. But actually, one of the things that, you know, that I was excited about, like when we first met, you know, when you were, you know, applying for the job, if you will, like you talked about your previous experience with, I forgot the terms you used, but like enablement programs that you put in place. And that got me really excited. And so I might be worth sharing, but I think that would be a great thing to do. And obviously you come with experience. So.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. So the term I typically use is strategic volunteering, and that's the framework that I've put in various organizations over my professional career. We're looking at how we take that framework and apply it to the contribution framework of Drupal. And the team and I have actually spent a lot of time about how we can actually try to get that into place as soon as next year to support what already happens from a contribution perspective. But there's an element of it, and you'll see it as soon as we launch our volunteer call for DrupalCon 2021, where we're going to embed that a bit and kind of test things out. But there's a couple key factors to it that I feel really strongly that are going to help with what we're trying to do here. And one of those is the stewardship element of volunteering / contribution, right? So we're starting that a little bit with the communication I mentioned around, hey, what is happening and where do they need help and how do I get started? There's a matchmaking element to making sure people not only understand what the opportunities are, but that they find the right opportunity based on what's their interest, what are their skill sets, where do they want to grow personally and professionally. We have an opportunity as a Drupal community to provide that experience, which I think could be really compelling. Also helps justify a bit of your contribution time. So if you're not a paid contributor, what are you getting out of it other than feeling like you're helping Drupal, which is huge, but is there a way that it can help you with your skills or with your network? It can propel your career. And I think there's a way that we as the Drupal Association can embed that in what we're doing across the community and make that possible. The other piece of that is we as the Drupal Association are looking at, we're calling it our contribution enablement team, which is a new part of the team we haven't had before. So we're shuffling the deck chairs to try to reorganize that's really going to support where we want to go with both the strategic plan and the project. But you're going to see us as a team really putting more time and effort and personalization around making sure that anyone who's a potential contributor really has what they need. There's a lot of tools that are available once you know where to go, but I've talked to a lot of people that don't know where to get started, or they contributed a long time ago and don't know where to fit in now. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, part of that inclusion is helping people fit in and fit into the right places and work on things like succession planning. So a lot of that's getting embedded to how we're approaching this. And I think it can really help our community in a lot of really positive ways that have an effect not only on the project, but on people as well, which, Dries, I know you and I are both passionate about people getting what they need out of this too, right? And this is such an opportunity to help people in a variety of ways. And this is just one way to do that.
Yeah. And we give them great learning experiences, you know, collaborating with people all around the world, some of the best people on specific topics in the world. I mean, I think It's a win-win. But I love what you said, because one of my personal learnings is that it's hard for people to jump in sometimes. There's big barriers, obviously you need to know what you can do and where help is needed. That information can be hard to find, but even if you make all of that available, sometimes people are a little bit shy. I don't know if that's the right word, but they may not feel like they're capable enough to help, right? And so it's a big step for a lot of people. And what I've learned is that just asking them can really help result in a lot more contribution. Like just that little nudge of like, hey, would you mind helping with this? Like, we really could use your help. And I've always been surprised about how many people, that's all it takes sometimes. And so I like how these enablement programs can have a big impact. And I believe there's a lot of low-hanging fruit too. I haven't created an account on Drupal.org in a long time, but I imagine it's still more or less the same, where we don't really nurture people after they sign up. And like, it could be nice just like a week later to like, hey, here's a little thing, we would love your help with this. And maybe we ask them a few questions about their skill sets, and to your point, we can personalize it. I'm kind of dreaming here, but I think a lot of these things could really make a big difference, so
you're right. And I think too, couple things. One is, if the community will go there with us, there's a lot of things we want to try and pilot and get feedback on, and even things like how do we infuse more really strategic contribution stewardship into things like DrupalCon. So that may be, hey, when you register, you're going to let us know, are you interested in contribution, but also what are your skill sets? What are you interested in? What appeals to you, so we can do more matchmaking before you get to contribution day. So that's an example. But I think this is an area too where it's not just about the Drupal Association layering in a framework, but it really is an opportunity for local associations, local events, how Drupal's not about just what's happening at the top. It's about all of the local and regional events that happen that feed into the project and the community. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to work with all those associations and event organizers to say, how do we tackle a couple things? And one is, how do you help us at that local high touch opportunity help with this stewardship around contribution? But it also will feed into how we do more work at a local level around the diversity and inclusion. And when I talk about the Drupal ambassador opportunity, how we make sure that we've infused that at every level of the organization. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. There's going to be a lot of volunteer opportunity for people to help us come figure out volunteering, which is ironic, but also very cool. So there's, if you're a member of the community and you're hearing us talk about this, and this kind of gets you excited, and this speaks to you and your personal why, please reach out, because there's a way that I would love to infuse contribution. We need contribution to help us figure out how to get more contribution. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's an opportunity. It's a non-code contribution opportunity to get involved in the project. So.
Yeah, all of that is awesome. We're lucky to have you and to have your leadership in this. There's also a lot of great things happening in the community already, like the mentorship program. Like, these are awesome programs that help people get involved. So we should definitely help amplify or point spotlights on those as well, which we're doing, but it's worth recognizing all the awesome efforts that are happening already too.
Absolutely. It's about scaling. It's about scaling what we know we do well and amplifying, as you said. So thank you for sticking around backstage and coming back and chatting with me a little bit. I did want to remind everybody, we've got a deeper dive Dries Note, kind of post Dries Note Q&A coming up. So if you'll join us there, Dries and I will be available to answer your questions. And we hope to see you today and tomorrow as DrupalCon Europe continues. So thank you so much. And thank you, Dries, for sharing with us today. And it's really exciting that it's the 20th anniversary of Drupal. And if the community have some fun ideas about how to celebrate, let us know, because I know that y'all all know how to bake a cake, because I've seen all the fun celebratory Drupal cakes. So 20th birthday seems like a great idea.
Drupal loves cakes.
Get your blue Drupal icing. Get ready for January.
Yeah, one maybe thing that I can highlight real quick is Moshe Weitzman, longtime contributor. He's actually making a timeline of all of the major events in Drupal, and he's doing that through collaboration, so everybody can submit events in the history of Drupal. So
that'd be great. We'll make sure to share that.
That's worth checking out, and maybe if something to add to the timeline. So then by Drupal's birthday, we have a historic timeline of Drupal's history. So
that's great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Dries, for letting me crash the Dries note and get to hang out with you a little bit and talk about how we're supporting what you're doing.
It's great to have you. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
You too.